Okay, so you know that feeling when you like pick up a really nice leather bag or a pair of shoes and you can just tell
Yeah.
there's something about how it's put together.
Yeah.
It's just got that
Special.
it's special. Yeah, we're talking about the people behind the scenes today
Okay.
who actually make that happen.
Right.
Leather goods stitching machine operators.
Yes.
I've got to say, I've been looking through these RoleCatcher resources you sent over,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm kind of blown away by how much more goes into it than I ever realized.
It's true. Most people think about leather work and they just think about like one person hunched over,
Right.
meticulously hand stitching.
Yeah.
But the reality, especially now, is way more interesting
For sure.
and nuanced.
So to kind of kick things off, this RoleCatcher guide dives into the machinery involved.
Okay.
And we're not just talking about like your grandma's sewing machine.
Right.
We're talking flatbeds, arm machines,
Right.
even ones with multiple stitching columns.
Mm-hmm.
Like what kind of projects even need that level of complexity?
Yeah. It really speaks to the variety
Right.
of leather goods that are out there and how specialized
Wow.
the equipment has become. I mean, think about the difference between like stitching a watch strap versus a car seat versus like a giant leather duffel bag.
Oh, yeah?
Each one needs a different approach,
Okay.
different stitching techniques, and obviously different machines to be able to handle it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And speaking of precision, I was also kind of surprised by how specific the thread and needle choices are. Like, do these machines have a million different settings or something?
Pretty much.
Really?
Yeah, you have to know what you're doing.
Wow.
As a leather goods stitching machine operator, you need to know like the right thread weight and type to use for the leather
Right.
and what the stitching should look like.
Well,
Even the needle size and the point style makes a difference. Think about a decorative top stitch on a bag
okay.
versus the seam inside your wallet that you don't even see.
Right.
Totally different.
So there's a real art to it.
Yeah.
Even with these really powerful machines doing the hard work.
Yeah, it's really cool, I think.
It is cool.
It's like this blend of being a mechanic
Right.
and an artist.
That's
You
right.
have to have that mechanical understanding of the machines,
Yeah.
but also that eye for detail and craftsmanship.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And speaking of the career path, I was interested in how RoleCatcher breaks down the stages of like moving up in this job.
Right.
From entry level all the way to master stitcher.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
It is a cool title.
It is a cool title.
Yeah.
They even have examples of like what your day looks like
Oh, wow.
at each level.
That's helpful.
Super helpful.
Yeah.
What stood out to you about how you progress?
I thought it was really interesting how the focus changes as you move up.
Okay.
So at the beginning, it's all about being precise
Okay.
and learning to use the machines perfectly
Mm-hmm.
and knowing the basics about leather and stitching and all that.
Right.
But then when you get more experience
Yeah.
and you become like a senior stitcher or a master stitcher, it becomes more about solving problems
Oh.
and working with other people and even like giving your ideas about the designs.
So they're not just like following instructions anymore.
Right.
They're actually part of the creative process.
Yeah, like imagine a line cook
Yeah.
who becomes the head chef.
Right.
You got to know the basics first
Yeah.
before you can start experimenting.
Totally.
And making it your own.
Totally.
And that's why I think it's interesting that the guide mentions adaptability.
Mhm.
Remember, we were talking about all the different machines,
Mhm.
materials.
Yeah.
You have to be able to switch between them,
Yeah.
learn new techniques,
Right.
and even like fix things when they go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Because designs and trends change so fast.
Especially in fashion.
Exactly.
Which actually makes me want to ask.
Yeah.
The guide mentions that some of these leather goods stitching machine operators end up working directly with designers.
Oh, wow.
Almost like they're creating something together.
Huh.
What do you think that looks like in real life?
I don't know. It's fascinating to think about. Yeah, it's like the designer has this idea for a handbag or something.
Right.
So they sketch it out, the shape, the hardware, all of that. And then they take that to someone like a master stitcher.
Okay.
And then it becomes about how it feels.
So interesting.
Like what kind of stitching would look good? Would
Oh.
a contrast in color look cool?
Right.
Or even like, could we use the stitching to make a pattern
Oh, wow.
or like a cool texture?
So it's kind of both art and like really technical at the same time.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
It's like the designer has the vision in their head,
Uh-huh.
and then the leather goods stitching machine operator knows how to actually make it real.
Right, because they know all about the materials and the machines and stuff.
Yeah, and the guide even talks about how sometimes the
Yep.
stitchers will say, hey, actually,
Yeah.
this leather might not work.
Oh, wow.
Or we could try this instead.
Yeah.
Because they know how different leathers are gonna, like, act when you sew them.
That makes sense.
Yeah, like they might see a problem the designer didn't even think about.
Right, and then they come up with the solution.
Exactly.
Wow, that's actually really cool.
It is.
Not just like, here, do this.
Right, they're a part of the team.
Yeah,
It's like a real collaboration.
totally. So we've talked about the machines and like moving up in your job,
Mm.
but I wanted to ask about the tools
Okay.
because it's not just the big machines, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What other tools are they using?
So, yeah, the machines do a lot of the work,
Right.
but you still need other tools to, like,
Right.
make it perfect.
Yeah, finish it.
Yeah, like before you even use the machine, you have to get the leather ready.
Okay, how do you do that?
So you have to measure it and mark it, and sometimes even, like, shave it down in certain places.
Shaved it down?
Yeah, it's called skeeving.
Okay, I've never heard of that.
It's so that the stitching will be nice and even.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, so they use this tool that's kind of like a super sharp peeler.
Really?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
And then there are other tools too, like
Beaten
awls, yeah, for making little holes,
Okay.
and edge bevelers for rounding off the corners. And then even tools to make patterns or textures.
It's amazing how much goes into it that you don't even realize.
I know, it's crazy.
When you see like a really simple leather wallet, you'd never know how much work went into making it.
Totally. It's like those wood carvings.
Yes, exactly.
You know, think about all the tiny little cuts and sanding that goes into it.
Yeah, you just see the final product,
Right.
and it looks so smooth and perfect.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
never thought about it like that.
And it's the same with leather stitching.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about having the right tools and then having like the skill to use them.
Right.
What we were saying before about those fine motor skills.
Totally.
That's where they matter.
Yeah.
You can have the best tools in the world,
Uh-huh.
but if you don't know how to use them, it's not going to look good.
Totally. So we've covered the machines and the tools and like the career stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But before we move on, I wanted to ask about this part of the guide.
Okay.
It talks about staying up to date on trends,
Yeah.
and not just in fashion,
Right.
but also like new techniques
Mm-hmm.
and even sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like it all connects to that idea of a master stitcher being more than just someone who's good with their hands.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Like they need to know what's happening in the industry.
Totally.
Like what are people looking for?
Exactly.
And how can they make things better?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting how something like leather stitching,
Right.
which you think of as kind of like a traditional thing,
Yeah.
is actually really connected to like all these bigger trends.
It's
Like I wouldn't have thought that a leather goods stitching machine operator
Uh-huh.
needs to be up on like the latest in sustainability.
It's becoming more and more important.
Really?
Yeah, because people care about that stuff now.
That's sure.
Like when you buy a leather bag,
Right.
you want to know that it was made ethically.
Yeah, you don't want it to be like,
Right.
you know,
Bad for the environment.
and you want to know that the animals were treated well
Yeah.
and that the leather is good quality.
Right. So a leather goods stitching machine operator who knows about that stuff
Yeah,
would be really valuable to a company.
totally.
Like they could find better leather
Mm-hmm.
or even figure out how to use less thread
Exactly.
or make less waste.
They could even be the ones who are like, hey guys, we need to be doing this better.
Yeah, like they could really make a difference.
That's actually amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's making me think differently about like all the leather stuff I see in stores.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much more to it
There really is.
than I ever realized.
It's not just about making something pretty. It's
Yeah.
about making something that's going to last
Right.
and that's made well.
And that's responsible.
Exactly.
So we've talked about the craft itself.
Yeah.
But what about actually getting a job doing this?
Right, because you could have all the skills,
Yeah.
but if you don't know how to find a job,
It doesn't really help.
it's not going to do you much good.
So the RoleCatcher stuff has a lot about that too, right?
Yeah, they have a bunch of tools.
Like what?
They have this AI thing that helps you write your CV,
Well,
and they have a whole database of companies that are hiring.
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
Did you get to try any of that?
I did.
Okay, cool.
That CV tool is really something else.
Really?
It's not just looking for the right words.
Go.
It actually like understands what the job needs.
What?
Yeah, it's wild.
So it's like reading the job description
Uh-huh.
and then being like, okay, you need to highlight this.
Yeah, and it tells you what skills to focus on.
That's so smart.
I know, it's like having your own little career coach.
Totally. And then the database of companies is probably super useful too.
Oh, yeah, especially if you don't know where to start.
Yeah, because you can, like, see who's out there
Mm-hmm.
and what kind of work they do.
Yeah, and you can get a feel for their style.
Okay.
Like what kind of leather goods they make.
And then you can tailor your application to them.
Exactly. It's all about being prepared,
Right.
like with anything else.
Showing that you've done your research,
Mm.
that you're not just sending out a million applications.
Yeah, you want them to know that you're interested in them specifically.
Totally. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to ask about is the interview,
Oh, yeah.
because that can be so nerve-wracking.
The worst.
Yeah.
You never know what they're going to ask.
RoleCatcher has stuff about that too, right?
They do. They have a whole section on interview prep.
Oh, that's so helpful.
Yeah, they give you like sample questions
Okay.
and tips on how to answer them.
What kind of questions do they ask?
Well, obviously they ask about your experience
Right.
and why you want the job.
Okay.
But they also ask about like how you solve problems. And if you're good at adapting to new things.
Which we talked about.
Exactly.
And they want to know that you're actually passionate about leather work.
Yeah, you have to really love it.
It can't just be any job.
Right. It's got to be something you're excited about.
Exactly.
That's so cool. So for someone listening who's like,
Yeah.
okay, I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
What are the, like,
Should they do?
yeah, what are the key takeaways?
Don't be scared of the machines.
Okay.
You can learn how to use them.
Right.
And don't forget about the other stuff.
Like what?
Like being able to talk to people
Okay.
and work on a team.
Right. Be a good communicator.
Exactly.
And be ready to keep learning new things.
Yeah, this is a job that's always changing.
So you never stop learning.
Never.
That's awesome.
It is pretty cool. Well, I think that's about it for our deep dive
I think so.
into the world of leather goods stitching machine operators.
It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and, like,
Yeah, of course.
sharing your knowledge.
This is fascinating.
I'm glad you liked it.
I learned a lot.
Me too, actually.
Oh, phew.
Yeah,
Well, we'll have to have you back on sometime.
I'd love to.
Awesome. Okay, well, that's it for this episode.
Okay.
See you next time.